The young Clemson secondary gave up a ton of passing yards against Wake Forest and actually have been doing so the past couple of weeks. When you look at teamrankings.com and the Clemson Tigers and an opponent passing yard percentage, they are one of the highest in the nation, ranked third at percentage of passing yards for total yards against the defense. We'll talk about that and more. Before we get into it, make sure you like this video and you subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date on all of our exclusive Clemson content we put out every single week. All right, myself here, Morgan Thomas with Mr. Houston Burnett. We're going to talk about the question down there on the screen. Might be a little clickbaitish. I know Houston's trying to tell me not to use this question, but I had to use the question because we want the clicks, right? We're here for the clicks. Is Clemson's secondary trash? Now, when you go on social media after a game that happened this last Saturday, giving up 45 points, mostly yards through the air and touchdowns, a lot of fans came out and were just like, you know what? It's amazing the 180 that we have done. It's all about the offense. But going into preseason, Houston, you remember it, all about the offense. The defense we don't have to worry about. I said this. We don't even worry about defense. Offense is where we have to worry. First of all, offense scored 51 points to win a game. Crazy. Second of all, defense is giving up a large amount of plays and yards in the passing game. Still winning games, which is number one, but it's begging the question, what's wrong with Clemson's secondary? Is the Clemson secondary trash? All right, now I'm going to go ahead and give you my opinion. And I'll tell you, I think that they're not trash. I think it's just a product of the situation, injuries, and youth on the defensive side of the ball, specifically with the secondary. But we'll start with you, Houston. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not even trash is a little too much to say. Like, that's not even remotely the case. I think situationally you're right. You got youth, inexperience. I mean, look, even some of the best guys that Clemson's recruited and had a chance to play last year haven't had as much to play. Fred Davis, Nate Wiggins, they've been out, injuries, all the other things that have kind of played into that with those guys. And then you're also having to push in with current injuries to Kuba and Jones and Green, a lot of freshman guys that you would love to have the opportunity to kind of ease in there and maybe have a little bit more reps instead of just, going straight into the frying pan as far as that goes. But this is going to be valuable experience for them, even if, they're getting toasted every now and again. I think Pride and Lucas will end up being great corners one day, but they're freshmen and it's really hard to develop. It's hard enough to get freshmen on the field in the first place, even if they are 5-star, 4-star type players. It's another thing for them to be like that. It's rare to have a Makuba to just step in and be really good like that. It normally takes a year or even 2 years for them to be fully seasoned. And I think that's going to happen. It's just situationally, you've lost a lot of guys. You lost guys to the NFL and Booth and Mario Goodrich, who were two solid guys. Look at Goodrich. He had a very up and down career until last year, and then he really produced. Well, it's going to be the same with some of these guys. It's just going to take a little seasoning, getting people back from injury, everything like that. You might have to deal with some suspect pass defense for a couple games, but I think by the end of the season, they're going to be in a better spot than where they were on Saturday.
I think that fans who jump to the reaction that the secondary is trash, they're no good. I will say the one thing is that, it is a quarter of the way through the season, and it does seem like that is an area of development, if you will, for Clemson's defense. I think when you look at going into the season and you look at my Morgan ratings that I tried to mimic off of the Madden rating system, it was glaring that the secondary was going to be the most inexperienced and the lowest rated of the positional groups on defense, outside of Andrew Makuba, who had a ton of snaps, almost over 800 snaps, I think, 700, 800, something around that for a true freshman, crazy amount of snaps. He had the experience and the talent to do that. The other guys are still coming along. You got guys like Fred Davis, a highly rated recruit, but really hasn't had a ton of playing time. You've got guys like Nate Wiggins, who was pumped up in the spring, who I think is very talented, but again, doesn't have a lot of snaps under his belt. And Sheridan Jones, who is not been able to play because of a hip flexor. So you're dealing with injuries and you're dealing with youth. Again, let's look at the roster real quick. So you've got Sheridan Jones, the senior, wasn't able to play. Fred Davis, a junior, was able to play, but hasn't had a ton of snaps. And then you got Malcolm Green, who's really a nickelback, but wasn't able to play. Nate Wiggins, who's a sophomore, again, who really has not a lot of experience. So he's still learning through things. That's it. That is your non-true freshman list right there for cornerbacks. So after that, you have Jaden Lucas, who's a 5-star, but again, he's a true freshman. You got Toriano Pride, who's really good, but again, true freshman. Then you got Miles Oliver, who is not playing because of injury. So you really have 2 true freshmen and a junior and a sophomore, and that's it right now. Hopefully going into this weekend with the big game against NC State, these guys will be back. But when you really look back in hindsight, it's kind of like we should have known this was coming, because it wasn't just in the cornerback group that had injuries. It was in the secondary and the safeties as well. You had Andrew Makuba, who couldn't play, so that left you with R.J. Mickens and Jalen Phillips and Tyler Venables, Sherrod Koval, who's a true freshman. So again, injuries hurt the secondary against Wake Forest. And really, I say tone it down when you're saying when you had those like immediate reactions to, oh, they're terrible or whatever, especially after just one game. One I would say I wouldn't necessarily say a bad game. It's just an inexperienced game. It just happened, right? They still won the game. They still were able to fight through and get that final batted ball at the very end. But I would say hold back the snap judgment there, because this team is going to get better and improve as the season goes on. I look forward to seeing what the Tigers can do in the secondary. I think there's some things that they can do to help. Obviously, Wes Goodwin called some adjustments there halfway through and basically did a 2 safety coverage, cover 2. What do you think about the adjustment that Wes Goodwin made?
I think that's been part of the things that have been the most intriguing to me from his coordinations. We tend to go, well, there were some plays in like Furman or Louisiana Tech or Wake where in the third quarter, Wake comes out, boom, 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 and it's like, what's going on? But in each of those 4 games, Goodwin made an adjustment from the third to the fourth. And if you look at all the totals, Georgia Tech scored 7 points. It was the most effective offensive quarter in game 1. Not so much in the fourth quarter. Same with Furman, same with Louisiana Tech, and same with Wake Forest. Wake Forest came out and scored 21 points in the third quarter and scored 3 in the fourth. And some of that's play calling and all that kind of stuff, and they were trying to run the ball a little bit more, but at the same time, it was effective. The move that Clemson made was effective to limiting them in what Wake Forest was trying to do. And that ultimately was the difference in the game. You didn't give up as many bombs or penalties or whatever in the fourth, and that proved to be the difference. And so it's a progression. I feel like when you're progressing this way, where Clemson is 4-0 with a ranked win on the road, as opposed to being 2-2 and rudderless, the rocket ship can keep going up from here. And I think this is a good spot for Clemson to be in going forward.
What I was going to mention as well is just the Wake Forest receiving and quarterback play. I mean, we knew, again, going into the season that Wake Forest was going to be a heavy pass attack team that was going to be difficult for Clemson to stop against anybody, even the secondary that was already out there, including the secondary that wasn't there as well. It was going to be a difficult task for the Clemson defense. Sam Hartman is a guy who can light you up at any given moment. He's regularly passing for over 300 yards a game. And then they have the receiving core that can really beat most teams in the ACC. A.T. Perry, Donovan Green, and Jamal Banks all look really good. Now, granted, Clemson did make them look a lot better as well. I will say this. I think that Clemson, really hurt themselves unnecessarily by getting into a mode where it was, let me just hold the player, or let me just get a pass interference to avoid a big time touchdown. Now, Clemson, now Houston, looking back at that, do you wish they would have done something different?
Well, some of that, yeah, but some of that is there were certain packages you're trying to get pressure on the quarterback, and most of these happened, at least from the couple that I was able to point out. When they brought the most pressure, they knew that they had a one-on-one matchup. So it's not a matter of an adjustment or anything like that. You have your set that you're running, and when Wake Forest saw that, Tim Hartman, wide receiver, their coordinator, were smart enough to know, hey, we got this matchup right here, one-on-one, and we're going to go up top for this. There was no, hey, we're throwing into coverage at all. It was one versus one. And so it's a credit more to Wake Forest that they knew where that was going to be. I'm sure if he didn't have enough time, that might have been different. Look at 2021's result. He didn't have as much time, and they were able to confuse him. But they kind of knew what was coming a little bit, and so they knew they could go to a matchup base, and they found the matchups every time. So it didn't matter. Like, yeah, you're going to either give up a touchdown or give up a PI, but that's Wake Forest seeing that one-on-one when the pressure was coming.
What I really like about it is the fact that Nate Wiggins didn't give up. There were a few plays where I was like, man, this guy knows that they're coming at him, knows that they're going to pick on him almost every single pass play. It was like, where's number 20 on the field? They're going to go get him. And as Wes Goodwin mentioned, even the greats are that way. How many times have we heard, even on Sundays now, Jalen Ramsey, oh, he's trash. He's no good. Every time I see him play, he gets burnt. Yeah, even the best guys out there get beat up. Look at A.J. Terrell. He's a guy who's been able to go to the NFL and do a great job, right? There are plenty of times when he was at Clemson where it was like, ooh, man,
Jamar Chase.
Up.
Jamar,
you're going to get situations where you're going to get burnt up, and it's because of the aggressive defense, as you mentioned, that Clemson plays. You just got to grow through it. You got to just it's almost like a rite of passage. Now Nate Wiggins has that badge of honor. Fred Davis has that badge of honor. Yeah, you know what? We got burnt. We still walked away with a win.
Well, you look at people like Mario Goodrich. That people were saying that a lot about Mario Goodrich, and what happens in 2021, he becomes one of the stalwart. He's easily the number 2, just as dependable as Andrew Booth in that secondary. So it just takes time. Secondary is kind of like offensive line, where unless you have a finished product coming out to get on the field, it takes time to develop them. As far as that goes, it takes time. You don't often see ready-made lockdown first-round corners. It takes time for them to get.
I would say too, like Dabo mentioned maturity as well, not making things up on the fly, not trying to get yourself out of a bad situation by doing something that might have worked in high school, but it's definitely not going to work nowadays, especially against probably the ACC's best wide receiver core outside of, I would say, Clemson. Wake Forest is not one of those teams where you can just make it up on the fly and try to cover up a mistake. You have to listen to what the coaches are calling, and you have to prepare yourself before the game starts, even a few days before, weeks before, so you know what's going to come at you, so you can be ready when the time comes. So I think Dabo mentioned that it's just about maturity, growing up, and trusting the play call and sticking to what the play is there. That's another thing that I was concerned with. When you start seeing the defensive backs throw their hands up and get frustrated with each other, you either beat each other up and you lose the game, or you come together. It seemed like Clemson just fought through it. Maybe they were some jawing back and forth within the team secondary, but it seemed like they fought through it.
Yep. I don't know. Can't really tell, but from all accounts, it looks like they did, especially with the way the game ended. You had a guy who had got picked on all game to finally make a play at the end of that, kind of poetically. And so that's just kind of what you got to do.
All right. Well, hey, let us know what you think in the comments. Is Clemson's secondary really as bad as some people would like you to think? Or what do you think? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button.